Now, cryptocurrencies have been capturing the attention of investors lately, especially Bitcoin. In 2017, its value rose up by almost 1,500%. On our Facebook page, Ringgit Sense TV3 last week, we put up a poll asking if cryptocurrencies are just an investment bubble waiting to burst, or maybe it really is a good investment. Well, after you guys responded, 79% of our viewers said the former. And only 21% think that cryptocurrencies are the next big investment. The question still remains, is it a legal tender in Malaysia? Also, what happens if the servers storing your cryptocurrencies are hacked? Will you be protected against losses? We visited International Center for Education in Islamic Finance, INSIF, to speak to Assistant Professor Dr. Ziyaad Mahomed to try and understand how cryptocurrencies work. According to Dr. Ziyaad, cryptocurrencies are a form of encrypted currencies that uses blockchain technology. The idea behind this is to create a safe mechanism for cross-border trade. The transaction is recorded on a ledger called the blockchain, and this is publicly available for everyone to see. Every time a new transaction or block takes place, it's added to the long chain, hence the name blockchain. The challenge with cryptocurrencies is that central banks, like Bank Negara, does not control its use, like the ringgit. So how is using cryptocurrencies different from using, let's say, an e-wallet or paying with a credit card?
So actually it cannot be used as legal tender in Malaysia. It can't be used, in fact, in many countries as legal tender. The thing with cryptocurrency is it can only be defined through those that confirm it. So, fanciful again. But simply how it works is, if we take an example of Ahmed. Ahmed has 10, let's say, bitcoins, okay, very popular cryptocurrency. So what he does is he wants to transfer these coins perhaps to pay for something. So he buys a laptop and he wants to pay the vendor using his bitcoins. Now when he transfers his bitcoins, then that goes on to a supplier network. So in other words, the vendor accepts it, confirms that it has been received, and now it goes up to the blockchain. But it needs to be confirmed by the entire community first before it's recognized as a legitimate Bitcoin transfer. So what happens is we introduce someone called the miner. The miner is the one, not the typical miner who digs, for gold. Here he's digging for crypto. He's digging for currency. What he does is, his job is to confirm whether that cryptocurrency has actually been valid, solve a puzzle, and then it gets loaded onto the block. So in other words, we want it to be recorded onto the block. The miner's role is to ensure that, yes, this is truly a valid Bitcoin. And once the miner confirms it, he gets paid for his service. So there's a bunch of miners. Everyone has the opportunity to confirm. The first one that confirms basically gets paid for his work. Now what his job is to identify something which is very much hidden in that transaction. And that little secret tells you that, yes, this is truly an original Bitcoin transfer. It's like when we see, some of these original apparel, clothing apparel, and we want to know, is that truly original? But in order to look for that, we might, recognize something very unique about it. In the case of Bitcoin, there's something called a hash. And that hash is known as the SHA-256 hash. Okay? So a miner will look for that, but he needs a lot of processing power to identify that. And that's why just a few miners in the world can actually confirm that onto the blockchain. So if you ask me if it's different from cash and e-wallets, yeah, I'd say it's very different from cash and e-wallets. Cash, e-wallets, and usual internet banking and SMS banking, etc., applies your own fiat currency. So your ringgits are simply being transferred through a bank, through a channel, from one party to another. Here, we're transferring cryptocurrency from one party to another.
Okay, so what's the situation like in Malaysia? What's the actual status of cryptocurrencies? And what about people who actually use it and trade it?
Okay, so there are two different questions here. One is it valid currency? Two, can it be invested in and traded in? So very different questions. If we look at the currency part, then we know it's not legal tender. Now, currency from the Islamic perspective might not be defined as something that needs legal tender, but it's a global practice that a currency of a country is what is recognized by its government, by its sovereign. So therefore, if you ask, is cryptocurrency a legitimate legal tender? And in Malaysia, we say, no, it's not. The regulator says that it's not legal tender. But on the other hand, can you actually store it? Can it be investment? And yes, it can be investment as long as you identify it as valid investment. If you identify it as valid investment, that means now that you probably would have to pay tax for it. And then the regulator will now inquire whether that will be a recognized asset for tax purposes. So that's your kind of definition of whether it would fall within the asset base or whether it would be in the currency base.
I see. Okay. So what are your thoughts on some people in Malaysia who are actually using it as a form of investment? What would you have to say to them?
Well, you know, looking for the next big thing is typical human behavior. We always want to know what's going up and we want to invest in it and take part in the upside. But that's not always, you know, very safe an investment. And in order to do that, we need to understand the fundamentals of the market, which means if you want to invest in cryptocurrency, at least understand how it functions, understand what's been going on globally in terms of the rise of these currencies and the decline of these currencies. Bitcoin, for example, was created in 2009, and it didn't experience much of a valuation appreciation until to 2017. At the beginning of 2017, this cryptocurrency shot through the roof, and everyone knows about Bitcoin's massive gain, and it hit $20,000 from a $1 valuation earlier. It hit $20,000 for one Bitcoin, making you an instant billionaire if you had just a few Bitcoins. So that type of investment, naturally, where things go up and down erratically, because a month later it dropped to $8,000. When investments go up erratically and go down, then it's highly speculative in nature. When they become highly speculative in nature, are they really good investments? Are they safe investments? So that would depend on your risk profile. If you are a highly aggressive investor that's looking for the next big thing but willing to lose everything, then by all means consider that as an investment. But if you're a bit cautious and you'd like a safer investment, then you have to consider where this is the way you want to go.
Okay, so that's talking about stability. Also, on the topic of safety, how safe is it actually to deal online, especially when we have hackers and people who can actually get into your information? So what's your thoughts on this? How can hacking actually be done in the cryptocurrency world?
The specialty about blockchain technology, the unique selling point of blockchain is that it cannot be hacked. So the idea was to market a concept of cryptocurrency on a blockchain that can't be hacked. So in other words, ultimate safety. But the reality is, whilst the blockchain can't be hacked, the exchanges that offer the cryptocurrency can be hacked. And that's what's happened in the past, over the last year or so. We find that very large exchanges have actually been hacked, and a lot of Bitcoins and crypto have been stolen using the exchange. So when you talk about safety from that perspective, then you have to consider whether the exchange that you are purchasing from or investing through is safe. So in other words, if you think about it from a banking perspective, our normal money uses a bank. We would go to a bank, put our money in, and then transact through a bank. Well, here they're not going through banks. They're going through something called an exchange, which is really a server, a data server. So that records all the transactions. Now, is that safe? Now, that's the question you need to ask from a safety perspective. Yes, there have been hackings, but there have been very few. Okay, there have been very few hackings because it is quite difficult to get into even the exchanges. So for that matter, the question is, do people rob banks? Well, so from a percentage perspective, I wouldn't say that cryptocurrency is any much more dangerous than banking, except for the fact that banking is regulated whilst cryptocurrency is not.
Okay, so about cryptocurrencies being used in Malaysia, some merchants are actually offering that you can use cryptocurrencies in daily life. So what's your views on how Malaysians are actually using it in their daily transactions?
It's interesting to note that, yes, some Malaysians have been quite entrepreneurial and have entered into a trade of crypto and using and accepting cryptocurrency. The challenge, of course, is always the safety. The safety of the issue is the transaction has to be based on the spot rate of the currency. So therefore, holding the currency is already an issue from a safety perspective because the prices have been fluctuating. Then, does the Malaysian infrastructure currently allow that kind of exchange to take place? So cryptocurrency requires a blockchain network, it requires miners to confirm at some level. So is that actually taking place? So we would have to caution the Malaysian viewers on considering whether all of these aspects have been in place. But you have to be aware of the fact that if I decide to use a book to buy an asset from you, and you accept it as a trade, then that is still a legitimate trade between us. However, if something goes wrong, then there's nothing for us to fall back on.
Okay, tell us a little bit about what ICOs are, initial coin offers. What should investors know about ICO?
So an initial coin offering is very much the same as an initial public offering. So if a company wants to go public or wants to be listed, then they release their shares in the market for everyone to buy. So the coin offering is really much the same thing. The only difference is that I'm not launching a share, I'm launching a coin, a digital coin. And that digital coin represents certain assets or certain ideas that I've had. And there are a number of ICOs that have been listed globally. The challenge with ICOs is you need to have an ICO that's regulated. If it's not regulated, then you can have the potential of many scams and Ponzi schemes. Now, Malaysia, for example, doesn't have regulation for ICOs specifically. That means that if an ICO is launched in this country and someone invests in it and they happen to lose all their money, well, there's no regulation that can secure them from that perspective. So you will find that the biggest regulators in the country, like the central bank, BNM, or SC, Securities Commission, they've constantly issued warnings and cautionary announcements to have a look at these ICOs and understand what they actually mean and understand the fact that they are not falling within any regulation or guidelines like the Companies Act or anything like that. So therefore you are exposed, very much like cryptocurrency. You're very much exposed.
Okay. Taking Malaysia as an Islamic country, so from a Muslim perspective, how is cryptocurrency Sharia compliant?
Yeah, this is a question we have to deal with on almost a daily basis from around the world. Well, the question is, how have scholars considered cryptocurrency? Okay, and you have three types of scholars globally that have issued fatwa on or opinion on the cryptocurrency. You have one group that says it's totally permissible, based on the fact that the recognition of currency in Sharia is about istilah, which simply means social concurrence. It means that I agree, you agree that this value is X, and therefore we will trade on it. So the scholars that have agreed that it is social concurrence have allowed it. Then those that have said it's not allowed at all. Why? Because it hasn't been issued by the country, it is not recognized as legitimate currency, there's too much of uncertainty in the trade and speculation, and it's probably a security risk as well. And those scholars have said it's prohibited. Finally, you have the group of scholars that say exercise caution. It's not prohibited, nor is it permitted completely, but exercise caution because it's a new field, it's a new kind of asset. We are still defining whether it is a security or a currency or an asset, what exactly it is. So we're saying if you want to enter into it, then exercise caution, try and understand as much as you can before you go ahead.
What's your personal view on it? Because what you explained just now was more on the technical side. So your personal opinion on, if people were to ask you, is it or is it not? What would you say?
I'd have to say we go back to the original discussion, two parts. Are you holding it as currency or are you holding it as a store of value? So if you're holding it as currency, then one will have to ask, does everyone accept that it's currency? And I don't think that everyone accepts that it's currency at this stage. Is it a store of value as an investment? Well, then you've got to ask, if I sell it in a year's time, will it still be valid? Is it open to any security risks? Is there a high level of speculation in trade? So if you look at all of these issues, then my personal opinion would be to exercise caution, simply because cryptocurrency has been used speculatively at this stage. So it's not that I'm saying it's not Sharia compliant. I'm saying exercise caution because it has been abused already. And therefore, those that might be very vulnerable looking at something like this as a quick win, as a quick way to get a lot of money, that is where the danger arises. And then it's very much like a gambling transaction when you don't know what you're getting into and you're hoping to win big and you end up losing everything. So if you're entering into the transaction on that level, then that would not be the right way to go.
How can actually Malaysian regulators actually move forward in terms of regulating the use of bitcoins and cryptocurrencies in Malaysia? What's your thoughts on that?
They need to look at it from the perspective of what can be offered, look ahead 5 years, and it's very difficult in cryptocurrency and the digital market to look at something 5 years ahead. Things change on a daily basis. So they would have to look at what's been happening globally, learn from the regulators that have allowed it, learn from what the safety concerns have been, the stability issues, but also consider the monetary and economic impact. Because if you introduce cryptocurrency, what will the impact be on your own currency? Certain countries have decided to launch cryptocurrency via the government, so a sovereign crypto. In that way, they seem to have isolated any possible risk of currency being issued by anyone, any company.